You're listening to Alaska Real Estate Podcast. I'm Chris Story, your host for great adventures in real estate. Today, you'll hear from Chris Gosselin. Now, he's with NAR back in Washington, D.C., and he's your political representative. Stacy Schubert's here with Alaska Housing's brand new marketing campaign, plus an Alaska USA exclusive mortgage brief. Remember, if it happens to real estate, it matters to you.
Hi, this is Michelle Stewart with Alaska USA Title Agency in Wasilla. We currently serve Alaskans at our 5 locations in Anchorage, Wasilla, Kenai, Fairbanks, and Juneau. Because of the support of our great customers in the communities that we serve, Alaska USA Title Agency is considering expansion into other areas statewide to better serve all Alaskans. I'm both excited about our growth and thankful to each of you that have trusted us with your title and escrow needs. Should you or your clients have any questions regarding refinances, purchases, relos, REOs, cert to plats, commercial transactions, or anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of our experienced escrow or title officers. We're happy to take your call, and we're happy that you've chosen Alaska USA Title Agency. You can reach us at www.akusa.title.com.
All right, Stacy, how did this new marketing campaign come about?
Well, you know, we did a lot of research in the development of the campaign, and it was really important for us that we got this right. We know a lot about first-time home buyers, and they're about Matt and Jen's age. And going through a home buying process is very stressful, especially for first-time home buyers. So we're in a position where we have the tools to be able to assist, and we feel like Matt and Jen are great characters for getting that word out there.
Let's get moving, Matt.
We have a lot of stuff to pack.
Oh, don't touch the clock.
TikTok, our new home rocks.
Cute. But you're right. Our first home, a place with space.
And we didn't even know we qualified before we took that home choice class at Alaska Housing Finance Corporation.
And thanks to AHFC's first-time homebuyer program, our house payment will be less than our rent.
AHFC, opening doors for Alaskans. To sign up for a free home choice class, go to ahfc.us.
TikTok, cuckoo.
And what's great about Matt and Jen, too, is that it's very scalable. I mean, you can envision down the road how we could be talking about other products as well, but this fits with their lifestyle choices right now. And that market comprises about an entire half of our entire portfolio. So it's at the interest rate where we tend to be most competitive most often. The point about the home choice classes, every single class that we deliver has an evaluation mechanism associated with it, and consistently our instructors get 4s and 5s out of a number 5 rating scale. So again, what Matt and Jen talk about is based on the real life experiences of literally thousands of Alaskans who participate every single year.
Now let's check in with NAR for the latest political update.
My name is Chris Gosselin, and I'm a regional political rep. I cover about 10 states across the country, and Alaska is one of them. So it's a pleasure to be working with you all. Whenever I go back home to Vermont, having lived in Washington for a little over 10 years now, I walk outside the front door, and you know, if it's 15 degrees outside, I'm like, forget it. You know, you get so soft living in what everyone in my family from Vermont at least describes as the South, and I suppose it is technically south of the Mason-Dixon line.
What brought you to Washington, D.C.? Were you with the NAR somewhere else, or did you sign on in D.C.?
I've been with the National Association of Realtors for about 5 years, and before that, before the current political position, I worked as a legislative analyst, so I went over a lot of the pieces of proposed legislation on the Hill and prepared reports and so on that. And then before that, I worked for a nonpartisan Inside the Beltway Washington magazine, and NAR was actually one of my accounts, and so I hopped over from there to work at NAR, and then I was at school at Georgetown before that. My job is to work with our state and local associations to help inform realtors about what's going on in Washington, so it's sort of be a liaison between government affairs in Washington, D.C. and our state and local affiliates.
What do our members need to know about right now, either specific to Alaska or just in general, politically speaking? What are the hot-button issues as you see them?
The challenge that we're facing right now is that the hot-button issues that Washington is paying attention to aren't necessarily what they ought to be paying attention to, or at least from the perspective of the real estate industry. The biggest fight that's been going on over the course of the last several weeks would be the payroll tax extension bill. It was about a year ago that Congress decided to enact a 2% cut in the payroll tax, which is the money that goes to fund Social Security and Medicare. And so, which has been great to stimulate spending. Obviously, it's more money in people's pocketbooks, which is always a positive to stimulate spending. But of course, that has to be paid for somehow. One of the big battles that's been going on is how to pay for an extension of that legislation, or that tax cut, excuse me. And back in December, Congress voted to extend the payroll tax cut for 2 months, so it now expires on February 29th. And they used a guarantee fee increase on the government-sponsored enterprises, so that would be Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to fund the extension of the payroll tax. And so our concern is that this type of using the housing industry as a piggy bank really is not appropriate at any time, but especially in a time where the real estate industry is facing the challenges that it is in 2012.
My perception is that Fannie and Freddie already are facing enough challenges.
Well, that's certainly true, and there are a couple different sides of that, and one is that mortgage finance in general has really tightened up since it was as loose as it was back in the mid-2000s, and that's probably a good thing. NAR came out with a credit policy back in 2005, which raised some red flags about the ease of credit and the problems that the subprime lending industry had really started to create. Obviously, those warning signs went unheeded, and we ended up in the situation that we did a couple years later. But the problem now is that banks have been so skittish to lend money that it really is choking off some of the demand side of the housing market, and that obviously is a huge component of getting price stabilization and getting things back to normal. So we are not advocating, of course, to go back to the irresponsible loans that were going on several years ago. Responsible lending standards are really what we're looking for, and there's been a couple cases where this has come up. And with regard to Fannie and Freddie, there's a great example of some support from the folks in the Alaska delegation. We fought back when the Dodd-Frank bill was being debated to keep most of the real estate provisions out of the bill, and we were successful in that. One thing that pertains directly to real estate, though, is a provision that would require a 20% down payment for a Fannie or Freddie loan in order to prevent the bank from having to keep 5% of that loan on its own balance sheet. So the idea was, if you're a bank and you write a loan, you ought to keep some of that loan on your own books so that if the loan goes bad, you as a bank have a vested interest in making sure that the person that you're lending to has the ability to pay you back. The problem is that given the interconnectedness of the mortgage market and how most of those mortgages are sold onto the secondary market, there was a provision that would allow for really strong mortgages, so things that had traditional strong underwriting standards, high FICO scores, and normal 30-year fixed-rate mortgages, or normal ARMs that aren't the sort of exploding adjustable rate mortgages we saw in the past. But really strong mortgages would be exempt from that provision of retaining the risk. Now, one of the criteria the regulators put out was, why don't we include a down payment component? And that was something that obviously the real estate industry was strongly against. And we did get some strong support from the Alaska delegation on that. Senator Begich did sign a letter to the regulators on that, as well as Congressman Young. We did not get Senator Murkowski on that letter, but she has been helpful on several other things in the interim. So that's just one example of things where, in this environment, our goal is to prevent anything from getting worse, and we call it sort of the Hippocratic Oath of real estate that we want members of Congress to take, which is do no harm at this point. Given everything that's going on, let's not put any impediments in the progress of the housing market's recovery.
Time now for your mortgage brief, brought to you by Alaska USA Mortgage Company, statewide, a name you know and people you trust. Online at alaskausamortgage.com. This just in, a new ruling by USDA RD. No more cisterns. That's right, this straight from National Office of the USDA Rural Development. Our local Palmer office is trying to get an exemption from the National Office for some of the areas that routinely have properties with cisterns. But until something changes, RD will not finance a home with a cistern at all. FHA is in the same boat right now. However, we can request a waiver from the Santa Ana FHA office, and they've been granting them. It can take about an extra 2 weeks for approval, and if Congress passes the bill for an annual waiver, well, then FHA will be okay again. However, Rural Development is not accepting FHA's waiver for their financing. We'll keep you posted as this story develops. Stay tuned to Alaska Real Estate. As they say, all good things must come to an end. So it is true of this podcast, but fear not, my friend. We'll return next edition with something in store for you that you will not believe. National speaker and acclaimed author. Oh, his name? Well, tune in and find out. Our executive producer is Sandy Ehrenman. I'm Chris Story, and for all of us at Alaska Real Estate, stay classy, Alaska.
It was 1989, my thoughts were short, my hair was long. Caught somewhere between a boy and man. She was 17.